A wise woman doesn't cut people off because she is heartless. She does it because she has finally learned the price of giving her peace to the wrong people. There are 5 types of people she will quietly remove from her life without arguments, explanations, or regret. Stay until the end, because I'll show you exactly who they are, why wisdom demands distance, and how protecting your peace can completely change your life. Before we continue, answer yourself honestly. Who came to your mind the moment you heard this? And if you already know the answer, don't say their name. Just comment, "I choose peace," because sometimes the strongest form of wisdom is not confronting someone. It is realizing you no longer need to. Number 1, the person who constantly drains her energy. A wise woman eventually discovers something that most people learn only after years of disappointment. Not every person who enters your life deserves to remain there. This does not mean you become cold. It does not mean you stop caring. It does not mean you walk away from everyone who disagrees with you. It means you become conscious of what certain relationships are doing to your inner world. Because your energy is limited, your attention is limited, your emotional strength is limited. And every time you give these things to someone, you are making an investment. The question is not only, do I love this person? The deeper question is, what happens to me when I am around this person? Do you feel peaceful? Do you feel respected? Do you feel encouraged to become stronger? Or do you constantly feel tired, anxious, guilty, confused, and emotionally exhausted? There are people who do not need to shout at you to drain you. They simply bring the same problems every day, the same complaints, the same drama, the same negativity, the same crisis. And every time you try to help them, another crisis appears. You listen, you advise, you encourage, you forgive, you give another chance. But nothing changes. Slowly, you begin carrying emotions that were never yours to carry. This is where a wise woman becomes careful. She understands the difference between supporting someone and carrying someone. Supporting someone means you walk beside them. Carrying someone means they refuse to walk while expecting you to hold their entire weight. There is a difference. And if you do not understand that difference, compassion can slowly become self-destruction. A woman with wisdom does not measure her kindness by how much suffering she can tolerate. She understands that having a good heart does not require having an unprotected heart. You can care about someone and still create distance. You can wish someone well and still stop giving them access to your peace. You can forgive someone and still decide that they no longer belong in the closest circle of your life. This is not cruelty, this is discernment. And discernment is one of the highest forms of emotional intelligence. Think about a cup of water. If someone keeps taking from the cup but never allows it to be filled, eventually there will be nothing left. The same happens inside you. Every conversation takes something. Every relationship requires something. Every emotional connection requires energy. So ask yourself honestly, who leaves me feeling empty more often than fulfilled? That question can reveal more than 100 arguments. And there is another important sign. A draining person often makes you feel responsible for their emotional state. If they are unhappy, somehow it becomes your fault. If they are angry, you must fix it. If they are disappointed, you must explain yourself. If they make a mistake, you must understand them. But when you need understanding, suddenly they are unavailable. This creates an invisible imbalance. You become the giver, they become the receiver. You become the listener, they become the speaker. You become the one who adjusts, they become the one who expects. And after a while, you may not even recognize yourself anymore. You begin asking, how can I keep this person happy? Instead of asking, why am I losing myself trying to keep someone else comfortable? That is the turning point. A wise woman learns that peace is not something she finds outside herself. Peace is something she protects within herself. She does not need to announce every boundary. She does not need to create a dramatic ending. Sometimes she simply becomes less available. She stops explaining. She stops responding immediately. She stops entering every argument. She stops trying to rescue people from consequences they created themselves. And slowly, the relationship reveals its truth. If someone only values you when you are constantly available, they may not value you. They may value your access. If someone becomes angry because you have boundaries, perhaps they were benefiting from your lack of boundaries. And if someone disappears the moment you stop solving their problems, perhaps their attachment was never about love. It was about convenience. This is why a wise woman does not fear distance. She understands that distance can reveal what closeness was hiding. But there is an even deeper lesson. Sometimes the person draining your energy is not obviously toxic. Sometimes they are simply incompatible with the life you are trying to build. And this requires great honesty, because we often assume that someone has to be a bad person before we are allowed to step away. No, a person does not have to be evil for you to choose distance. They may simply bring out a version of you that you no longer want to become. And that is enough. You are allowed to protect the woman you are becoming. Because every season of life asks something different from you. There was perhaps a time when you tolerated everything because you wanted to be loved. Then came a time when you learned to say no. And eventually, there comes a time when you no longer need to explain why you said no. That is maturity. But once a woman learns to protect her energy, she begins noticing something even more dangerous than exhaustion. She begins noticing the people who slowly damage her self-respect, and that is where the next kind of person enters your life. Number 2. The person who disrespects her while calling it a joke. Some disrespect arrives loudly, you recognize it immediately. But the most dangerous disrespect often arrives disguised as humor. Relax. I was only joking. Why are you so sensitive? I didn't mean anything. You know I'm just being honest. These words can become shields for behavior that should have been corrected long ago. A wise woman learns not to judge disrespect only by the words someone uses. She watches the pattern. Because one joke may be a joke. One mistake may be a mistake. One bad moment may simply be a bad moment. But repeated disrespect followed by excuses is no longer an accident. It is a pattern. And patterns reveal character more clearly than promises. There are people who test your boundaries through small comments. They criticize your appearance. They mock your dreams. They embarrass you in front of others. They make jokes about your age, your intelligence, your choices, your relationships, or your ambitions. Then, when you react, they make the problem your reaction. This is a powerful psychological trick. Instead of discussing what they did, they force you to defend how you responded. Suddenly, you are the difficult one. You are too emotional. You are too serious. You are unable to take a joke. And slowly, you begin questioning your own perception. This is why a wise woman pays attention to how she feels after someone repeatedly speaks to her. Does she feel smaller? Does she feel embarrassed? Does she feel that she must constantly prove that she deserves respect? If so, something is wrong. Respect should not require a courtroom argument. You should not have to present evidence explaining why humiliation hurts. You should not have to convince someone that your dignity matters. A mature person understands this naturally. Now, this does not mean a wise woman becomes offended by everything. Wisdom is not hypersensitivity. Wisdom is clarity. She can laugh at herself. She can accept criticism. She can admit mistakes. She can hear uncomfortable truths. But there is a difference between someone correcting you because they care and someone humiliating you because they enjoy having power over you. One helps you grow, the other tries to make you smaller. Learn that difference. A person who genuinely loves you does not need to destroy your confidence to feel powerful. They do not repeatedly embarrass you and then hide behind humor. They do not make you feel weak and then call your pain overreacting. A wise woman does not fight every disrespectful person. That is important. She does not waste her entire life proving that she deserves respect. Sometimes the most powerful response is observation. Watch, listen, Notice, because people reveal themselves when they think there will be no consequences. When you stop reacting emotionally, you begin seeing the structure underneath their behavior. Who respects your boundaries? Who challenges them? Who apologizes? Who becomes defensive? Who changes? Who repeats the same behavior? This information is valuable, and once you have it, you do not need to argue with reality. If someone repeatedly shows you that they do not respect you, believe the pattern. Not the apology, not the promise, not the beautiful explanation, the pattern. A wise woman understands that apologies without changed behavior are simply repeated invitations to tolerate the same thing again. This does not mean she carries resentment. Resentment is another form of attachment. She can release the anger, she can wish the person well, she can forgive, but forgiveness does not mean renewed access. This is one of the deepest misunderstandings about boundaries. People sometimes believe that if you forgive someone, you must allow them back into the same position. No forgiveness can free your heart. Boundaries can protect your future. You can have both. Imagine your home. If someone enters your home and repeatedly damages things, would wisdom tell you to keep giving them the key because you have forgiven them? Of course not. Your home is protected because it has value. Your inner world is the same. Your peace has value. Your dignity has value. Your time has value. Your attention has value. So protect them. And remember something else. The way you allow people to treat you teaches them what access to you means. This is not about blaming yourself for someone else's behavior. It is about recognizing your power. If you continuously accept something that deeply violates your values, the other person may assume there is no real boundary. A boundary without action is only a request. A wise woman does not make endless threats. She simply changes her behavior. She says less. She explains less. She argues less. And she observes more. This quietness can be misunderstood. People may call her cold. They may say she has changed. They may ask why she no longer behaves the way she used to. And perhaps the answer is simple. She learned that peace is more valuable than winning an argument. She learned that dignity is more important than being liked. She learned that not every accusation deserves a defense. And she learned that sometimes walking away is not giving up. It is choosing herself. But there is another type of person that can be even more confusing. This person may not openly disrespect you. They may not drain you every day. They may even appear supportive. Yet they remember you only when they need something. And when you begin to recognize this pattern, you discover a painful truth about the difference between being valued and being useful. Number 3, the person who only values her when they need something. There is a particular kind of loneliness that comes from realizing someone only remembers you when they need you. Their message arrives when they have a problem. Their call comes when they need advice. Their warmth appears when they want a favor. Suddenly, you are important. Suddenly, they miss you. Suddenly, they say, "You are the only person I can trust." But when their life is comfortable, they disappear. No message, no curiosity, no concern, no effort. Then another problem arrives, and somehow your name appears again. A wise woman learns to recognize this without becoming bitter, because bitterness says, everyone is selfish. Wisdom says, some people are reciprocal and some are transactional. I must know the difference. This is emotional intelligence. A relationship should not be perfectly equal every day. There will be seasons when one person needs more support. There will be moments when you give more. That is normal. The problem is not temporary imbalance. The problem is permanent imbalance. If you are always available when they need you, but they are never available when you need them, you are not experiencing mutual connection. You are experiencing one-sided access, and one-sided access eventually becomes emotional exhaustion. Ask yourself, if I stopped helping this person, would they still want me in their life? That question can be uncomfortable, but discomfort can be useful, because sometimes we discover that people were attached not to our presence, but to what our presence provided. Maybe you always solve their problems. Maybe you always lend your time. Maybe you always listen. Maybe you always encourage them. Maybe you always make things easier. And because you are capable, people begin assuming you will always carry what they refuse to carry themselves. This is where a wise woman changes her approach. She stops proving her love through endless sacrifice. She begins allowing people to experience their own responsibility. This is not selfish, it is healthy. If you always rescue someone from every consequence, you may accidentally prevent them from becoming stronger. Sometimes love means helping. Sometimes love means stepping back. A tree does not become strong because someone holds every branch upright. It becomes strong because it learns to stand against the wind. People need the same opportunity. So when someone repeatedly comes to you only when they need something, do not immediately attack them. Observe, slow down. Do not answer every request instantly. Give yourself time. Ask yourself, do I genuinely want to do this? Is this relationship mutual? Would this person show up for me? Am I helping because I love them or because I am afraid they will be disappointed in me? That last question is especially important because many people are not generous from freedom. They are generous from fear. They fear being rejected. They fear being called selfish. They fear disappointing others. So they say yes when everything inside them is saying no. Then they become exhausted, then resentful, then angry, and they wonder why. The answer is often hidden in all the small yeses they gave when they wanted to say no. A wise woman learns that saying no does not make her unkind. It makes her honest. If you cannot help, say no. If you do not have the energy, say no. If something violates your values, say no. And notice what happens afterward. The people who genuinely care about you may be disappointed, but they will respect your boundary. The people who only valued your usefulness may become angry. That reaction gives you information. You do not need to manufacture a test. Life will test the relationship for you. The moment you stop overgiving, the truth often becomes visible. And this is where silence becomes powerful. You do not need to announce, I know you only contact me when you need something. You do not need to write a long message. You do not need to expose them publicly. You simply change your participation. You become intentional. You give when you choose to give. You help when you genuinely want to help. And you stop confusing accessibility with love, because being available to everyone can make you unavailable to yourself. Think about that. Every hour you spend solving someone else's unnecessary crisis is an hour you cannot spend building your own life. Every piece of emotional energy you spend managing someone else's chaos is energy you cannot use to cultivate your own peace. Every time you abandon your priorities to satisfy someone's temporary demand, you teach yourself that your life comes second. A wise woman reverses that pattern. She does not stop caring. She simply stops abandoning herself in the name of caring. And there is great freedom in this. When you no longer need everyone to approve of your boundaries, you become difficult to manipulate. When you no longer need to be needed, you become free. When you no longer measure your worth by how useful you are to others, you discover something deeper. You have value even when you are doing nothing for anyone. You do not have to solve a problem to deserve respect. You do not have to rescue someone to deserve love. You do not have to exhaust yourself to prove that you have a good heart. Your worth is not measured by how much you can give away. Your wisdom is measured by whether you know what to give, when to give it, and when to keep something for yourself. This is why a wise woman does not fear becoming less available. She knows that the right people will not love her only for what she can provide. They will value her presence. They will respect her boundaries. They will care about her life. They will ask how she is doing. They will celebrate her growth. They will not appear only when they need a solution. And when you begin making this distinction, something changes inside you. You stop chasing reciprocity. You stop begging for consideration. You stop trying to convince people to value you. You simply watch, because the truth about people is rarely hidden forever. Give them enough time and their patterns will speak. And once you learn to read those patterns without anger, without revenge, and without hatred, you gain something far more powerful than control over others. You gain control over who receives access to you. That is where wisdom begins to become visible, not in how loudly you confront people, but in how peacefully you choose where your energy belongs. And there are still people who can pass all three of these tests. People who do not obviously drain you, openly disrespect you, or constantly ask for favors. Yet they carry something much more subtle into your life. They make you question your own growth. That person is harder to recognize. And that is why the next lesson requires even greater awareness. Forward. The person who secretly competes with her growth. There is a kind of person who does not attack your life directly. They do something much quieter. They make you question your growth. When you begin changing, they may say, "You are not the same anymore." When you become more confident, they may say, "You think you are better than everyone now." When you become disciplined, they may call you boring. When you stop tolerating disrespect, they may say you have become difficult. When you begin protecting your time, they may accuse you of becoming selfish. Notice the pattern. They are not always angry because you are doing something wrong. Sometimes they are uncomfortable because you are becoming someone they can no longer control. This is one of the hardest people for a wise woman to recognize, because the competition may be hidden beneath friendship, family, or even affection. They may smile when you succeed. They may congratulate you. They may say the right words. But something in their behavior feels different. Your success makes them uncomfortable. Your confidence makes them insecure. Your progress reminds them of what they have not done. And instead of using your growth as inspiration, they quietly try to reduce it. This can happen in very small ways. You tell someone you have started exercising and they laugh. You say you are learning something new and they tell you it will never work. You share a goal and they immediately tell you why it is unrealistic. You become happier and they suddenly remind you of everything that could go wrong. You become independent and they begin questioning every decision you make. At first, you may think, maybe they are just trying to protect me. Sometimes they are. But wisdom requires you to look deeper. Are they offering thoughtful advice, or are they repeatedly making you doubt yourself? There is a difference between someone who challenges your plan and someone who challenges your belief that you are capable of having a better life. A person who genuinely cares about you may say, "Have you considered this risk?" A person who secretly competes with you may say, "You probably cannot do it anyway." One gives you perspective. The other gives you limitation. One wants you to become wiser. The other wants you to remain familiar. And this is an important psychological truth. People become uncomfortable when the version of you they benefited from begins to disappear. Perhaps they were comfortable when you were always available. Perhaps they were comfortable when you never said no. Perhaps they were comfortable when you needed their approval. Perhaps they were comfortable when you were uncertain. Then something changed. You started reading. You started thinking. You started exercising. You started building your career. You started healing. You started setting boundaries. You stopped explaining every decision. And suddenly the relationship feels different. Why? Because your identity is changing. And whenever one person changes, the balance inside a relationship can change too. This does not mean everyone who questions you is jealous. Be careful with that conclusion. Wisdom does not turn every disagreement into jealousy. Sometimes people genuinely see something you cannot see. Sometimes criticism is valuable. Sometimes someone loves you enough to tell you a truth that you do not want to hear. The wise woman does not reject criticism. She examines it. She asks, is there truth here? If there is truth, she learns. If there is no truth, she releases it. That is emotional strength. You do not need to become defensive every time someone disagrees with you. But you also do not need to surrender your vision every time someone doubts you. There is a quiet confidence that develops when you stop needing everyone to understand your path. You can say, "This is what I have chosen," and continue walking. You do not need a committee to approve your transformation. You do not need permission to become healthier. You do not need permission to become disciplined. You do not need permission to become peaceful. You do not need permission to outgrow an old version of yourself. And sometimes the people who knew the old, you will try to bring that version back. They may remind you of your mistakes. They may say, "You used to be different." And perhaps the answer is yes, I was. There is nothing shameful about that. Growth means you are different. A seed does not apologize for becoming a tree. A river does not apologize for moving forward. And a wise woman does not apologize because she has learned something that changed her life. But there is another hidden danger. Sometimes people do not compete with your success. They compete with your attention. They become uncomfortable when someone else receives your time. They want to know where you are, who you are talking to, why you did not respond, why you have other priorities, why you are spending time improving yourself instead of constantly being available. This can look like closeness. But closeness without freedom can become control. A healthy relationship allows you to grow without punishment. Healthy people do not need you to remain small so they can feel secure. They celebrate when you become stronger. They are happy when you discover new abilities. They do not interpret your growth as rejection. And when you recognize someone who cannot celebrate your growth, you do not need to fight them. You simply stop seeking their approval. That is one of the quietest forms of freedom. You stop bringing every dream to them. You stop asking them what they think about every decision. You stop handing them the power to define your confidence. You become selective, not secretive selective. There is a difference. A wise woman understands that not everyone needs access to her plans. Some dreams need silence while they are growing. Not because you are afraid of criticism, but because you understand that a fragile idea does not need constant outside judgment. Sometimes you need to build before you announce, work before you explain, grow before you prove. And when your life begins to change, let your results speak. You do not have to convince anyone. The woman who once needed approval slowly becomes the woman who trusts her own judgment. And that transformation is powerful. But there is another kind of person who does not necessarily compete with your growth. They bring something different. Wherever they go, there is confusion. Wherever they go, there is conflict. Wherever they go, there is emotional noise. And when you stay close to them long enough, you may begin confusing their chaos with your responsibility. That is where the next lesson begins. 5. The person who brings chaos into her peace. A wise woman eventually learns that peace is not simply the absence of noise. Peace is the ability to remain centered even when life becomes noisy. But this does not mean you must willingly place yourself in unnecessary chaos. Some people seem to live inside a storm they constantly create. There is always an argument, always a crisis, always someone they hate, always someone who betrayed them, always a problem, always a new emergency. And somehow, after every conversation with them, you are emotionally exhausted. You may begin your day peacefully. Then they call. 30 minutes later, your mind is full of anger, suspicion, fear, and confusion. Ask yourself, did I have a problem before I entered this conversation? If the answer is no, pay attention. Sometimes you are not experiencing your own emotions. You are absorbing someone else's. Human beings influence one another. Emotions spread. Fear spreads. Anger spreads. Anxiety spreads. Peace spreads too. This is why the people around you matter. You cannot spend every day standing inside emotional chaos and expect your mind to remain untouched. Imagine walking into a room filled with smoke. Even if you did not create the smoke, you will still breathe it. The same is true with emotional environments. You may not create the drama, but repeated exposure still affects you. This is why a wise woman becomes careful about the conversations she repeatedly enters. She does not need to know every piece of gossip. She does not need to participate in every conflict. She does not need to hear every accusation. She does not need to choose sides in every argument. Sometimes the most intelligent sentence is, "I do not know enough about this, so I will not judge." Think about how much peace this creates. A chaotic person often wants an audience. They need someone to validate their anger. They need someone to confirm that they are right. They bring you a story, but they leave out their part. They tell you what someone did, but not what they did before it. They explain why everyone else is the problem. And if you are not careful, you become emotionally involved in a conflict that has nothing to do with you. A wise woman learns to pause. She asks, "Is this my problem? Can I actually solve this? Is my involvement necessary? If I enter this conflict, will anything become better?" These questions protect you from unnecessary emotional spending, because attention is a form of energy. Where you place your attention, your life begins to move. If you constantly focus on drama, drama occupies your mind. If you constantly focus on what others are doing, you lose awareness of what you are doing. If you constantly discuss other people's lives, you may slowly abandon your own. There is a reason disciplined people are careful with gossip. Gossip trains the mind to search for negativity. It makes other people's mistakes more interesting than your own growth. And the more you practice it, the more natural it becomes. A peaceful woman does not need to know everything. She needs to know what deserves her attention. This is a major difference. You can be informed without being emotionally involved. You can understand someone's pain without taking responsibility for their choices. You can love someone without joining every battle they create. This is not indifference. It is emotional boundaries. And sometimes the person creating chaos will accuse you of not caring. They may say, "If you were really my friend, you would be angry too." But wisdom does not prove love through emotional escalation. If someone is drowning, you do not jump into the water without thinking. You first look for a way to help without becoming another person who needs saving. The same principle applies to emotional problems. Support does not require self-destruction. You can listen. You can offer perspective. You can encourage professional help when necessary. But you cannot live another person's life for them. And when someone repeatedly creates chaos and expects you to clean it up, distance becomes reasonable. Not dramatic distance, distance. You reduce the conversations. You stop participating in gossip. You stop answering every emergency. You stop allowing their urgency to become your emergency. You protect the atmosphere of your mind. And this can feel strange at first, because if you have spent years being the person who fixes everything, peace may initially feel like guilt. You may think, "Shouldn't I be doing something?" Sometimes the answer is no. Sometimes doing nothing is exactly what wisdom requires. Let the person experience the consequence. Let the situation unfold. Let reality teach what your advice could not. You do not need to be everyone's rescuer. Your life is not a rescue mission. And perhaps one of the greatest signs of maturity is learning that some situations improve when you stop interfering. There is another layer to this. Chaos does not always arrive as anger. Sometimes it arrives as constant negativity. Nothing is ever good enough. Every opportunity has a problem. Every person is terrible. Every future is hopeless. Every success has a hidden danger. Spend enough time listening to this, and eventually you may begin seeing the world through their eyes. This is why environment matters. A peaceful person can become anxious in a chaotic environment. A confident person can become doubtful around constant criticism. A hopeful person can become cynical around constant negativity. Protecting your peace does not mean pretending life is perfect. It means refusing to make negativity your permanent mental environment. You can acknowledge reality without worshipping pessimism. You can recognize problems without becoming the problem. And when you begin protecting your peace, you will notice something else. Some people will leave. Some people will become distant. Some people will accuse you of changing. Let them. Not every departure is a loss. Sometimes it is evidence that your life is becoming healthier. But there is one person who is even harder to release. The person who repeatedly hurts you and whom you repeatedly forgive. The person who promises change and then returns to the same behavior. The person you know you should distance yourself from. Yet something inside you keeps opening the door. That person requires the deepest form of honesty. 6. The person. She keeps forgiving at the cost of herself. There is a beautiful quality in a woman who can forgive. Forgiveness can free the heart. It can release anger. It can stop the past from controlling the present. But forgiveness without wisdom can become a cycle. And this is where many good-hearted women become trapped. They think, maybe this time will be different. So they give another chance, then another, then another. Each time they remember the good moments. They remember the history. They remember the promises. They remember who the person was when things were beautiful. And they keep hoping that person will return. But hope becomes dangerous when it refuses to look at evidence. A wise woman learns to separate potential from pattern. Potential is what someone could become. Tort is what someone repeatedly chooses to be. And your life is affected by patterns, not potential. Someone may have a beautiful heart somewhere inside them. They may have good intentions. They may have suffered. They may have reasons for their behavior. But if their repeated behavior continues to hurt you, you cannot build your life around who they might become. You must respond to who they are showing you today. This is not about judging someone's entire character. It is about recognizing reality. If someone hurts you once and genuinely changes, there is room for forgiveness. If someone hurts you repeatedly, apologizes repeatedly, promises repeatedly, and changes nothing, then the apology has lost its meaning. Words are easy. Transformation is difficult. A wise woman watches transformation. She does not demand perfection. She looks for effort. She looks for accountability. She looks for consistency. She looks for changed behavior when nobody is watching, because real change does not need a speech. It appears in behavior. And there is a powerful lesson here. Forgiveness does not require proximity. You can forgive someone from a distance. You can release hatred without reopening the door. You can stop wishing them harm without allowing them to harm you again. This is where many people misunderstand compassion. They think being compassionate means tolerating everything. No, compassion without boundaries can become permission. If you continuously protect someone from the consequences of their behavior, you may make it easier for them to continue. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself and for another person is to step back. Let them face reality. Let them learn. Let them live with the consequences of their choices, and let yourself heal. A wise woman does not measure her strength by how many times she can survive the same wound. She measures it by whether she learns not to return to the place that keeps creating it. Think about that carefully. Survival is not the highest form of strength. Learning is. If you keep returning to the same situation and expecting a different result without any meaningful change, you are not practicing patience. You may be practicing denial. There is a difference. Patience says, I will allow time for genuine change. Denial says, I will ignore the evidence because I want the story to be different. Wisdom chooses patience with boundaries. It does not become blind. And perhaps the hardest person to cut off is not the person you do not love. It is the person you still love, because distance is easy when there is no attachment. The real test comes when your heart says, but I care about them. Yes, you may care, you may miss them, you may remember beautiful memories, you may still wish they would change. You may even love them, but love does not erase reality. Sometimes you love someone and still understand that being close to them is unhealthy for you. That is painful. But pain does not mean the decision is wrong. Sometimes pain is simply the cost of accepting the truth. A wise woman does not ask only, do I love this person? She asks, does this relationship allow me to remain the person I respect? That question changes everything. Because a relationship can contain love and still contain destruction. It can contain memories and still contain manipulation. It can contain affection and still contain disrespect. It can contain history and still have no healthy future. History explains how you arrived somewhere. It does not decide where you must remain. You are allowed to honor what something once meant without continuing it forever. This is maturity. You do not have to hate the past to leave it behind. You simply understand that the past has completed its lesson. And when a woman reaches this level of awareness, she stops making dramatic announcements. She does not need to say, "I am cutting you off." She simply stops participating in what harms her. She stops explaining her boundaries to people determined to misunderstand them. She stops chasing apologies. She stops demanding closure from people who repeatedly created confusion. She begins giving herself closure. This is one of the strongest forms of independence, because closure is not always something another person gives you. Sometimes closure is the moment you finally accept, "I have seen enough." Not with hatred, not with revenge, not with bitterness, just clarity. And clarity is peaceful. You no longer need to keep checking whether they have changed. You no longer need to decode every message. You no longer need to wonder why they behave that way. You stop asking questions that their actions have already answered. This is where silence becomes powerful. Silence is not punishment. Silence is not manipulation. Silence is not a strategy to make someone chase you. Real silence is what happens when you no longer need to argue with reality. You have understood, you have accepted, you have chosen. And then you walk forward. A wise woman eventually realizes that cutting someone off is not always about removing a person. Sometimes it is about removing a pattern, the pattern of overgiving, the pattern of accepting disrespect, the pattern of explaining yourself, the pattern of rescuing everyone, the pattern of seeking approval, the pattern of forgiving without requiring change, the pattern of abandoning yourself so someone else can remain comfortable. That is what must be cut, because the deepest boundary is not the boundary you place around other people. It is the boundary you place around your own behavior. You decide what you will participate in. You decide what you will tolerate. You decide where your attention goes. You decide which conversations deserve your energy. You decide who receives access to the most peaceful parts of you. And when you make these decisions consciously, something extraordinary happens. You no longer need to become ruthless. You become clear. You no longer need to become cold. You become selective. You no longer need to punish people. You simply stop punishing yourself. That is the difference. A wise woman does not walk away because she believes she is better than everyone. She walks away when she understands that certain environments are no longer compatible with the life she is building. She protects her peace because she knows peace is where her strength grows. She protects her dignity because dignity is where confidence grows. She protects her attention because attention is where her life goes. And she protects her heart, not by closing it, but by becoming wise about who receives access to it. There is a quiet strength in this. You do not need everyone to understand. You do not need everyone to agree. You do not need everyone to stay. Some people will leave when you develop boundaries. Some will disappear when you stop overgiving. Some will criticize you when you stop participating in their chaos. Some will become uncomfortable when you grow. Let them. Your responsibility is not to remain the same person so that everyone else feels comfortable. Your responsibility is to live with awareness. And perhaps this is the deepest lesson of all. A wise woman does not cut people off because she has stopped caring. She creates distance because she has learned to care about herself too. She knows that peace is precious. She knows that time cannot be recovered. She knows that energy cannot be wasted endlessly. She knows that forgiveness is powerful, but she also knows that forgiveness without boundaries can keep a person trapped. So she forgives, she learns, she releases, and she walks, not because she has no heart, but because she finally understands what her heart is worth.